Well, I wouldn't necessarily say people have started dispersing, Tabo. Looking at, my surroundings right now, people are still hanging around, taking pictures. Really, some, just walking around and having time to themselves. I mean, earlier on, I was telling Imandra Petty, our colleague, that immediately after the procession left, the security guards who were manning and handling that area that you see behind me, the square itself, during the service, had asked people to start leaving, right? It looked like people were leaving. It was empty at some point. But now, as you can see, people are now moving back. And that's because, like I indicated earlier on, it's, while it's a church, it's also one of the majestic tourism attraction site, really. And nobody would come to a place like this, Tabo, and not want to make memories or at least take pictures that would last long, especially given the fact that today was a historic day, the funeral service of Pope Francis, who's been a pope since 2013, and somebody really who has shaken up the world and made them rethink what they stand for, be it Catholics or otherwise, but also being bold enough to also raise his voice for peace. So today, a couple of hours or minutes ago, his body was being interred at the St. Mary's Major. And this is, of course, because of his devotion to St. Mary, as well as, how he dedicated and devoted his papacy to St. Mary, who he believed protected and, safeguarded his papacy. So today, then, he is among the now 8 popes that are buried at the St. Mary's Major. The last one was buried around 350 years ago. So it's an opportunity to also reflect on the previous popes that have been laid to rest in the same basilica. Many of them, or many other popes, would choose to be buried here at St. Peter's, at the St. Peter's Basilica. This is where the body of the Pope, in fact, was viewed. And as you would have seen, while it was lying in state, Tabo, some of the significance and some of the things that, made up the viewing of the body largely are things that, reflected who the Pope was. The simple wooden coffin lined with a zinc is something that he wanted. And as you'd recall, other popes during the period of lying in state would be put on a raised pedestal when, of course, mourners come together to pay their final respect. But it was different with this Pope. He opted to be viewed from a coffin, but also it was to the ground, almost reinforcing his stance on humility and doing away with glorification. So those are some of the things that were key highlights in, during this entire process, and looking at how he opted to do things slightly different. There's a conversation that keeps, happening around whether or not, he was changing, these ancient old traditions, but others saying he wasn't changing them. He was specifically tailoring them to who he was.
Yeah. One of those conversations is around how the service itself was, others say, deliberately simplified, I suppose, reflecting, as you put it again, his entire approach to his papacy. Okay, Linda, hope you got me there. I'm saying others were saying that the entire service would have been deliberately simplified in how it was being carried out. I suppose echoing the sentiments that you've just reflected upon, how he approached his entire 12-year papacy.
Well, Tab, I'm struggling to hear you there, but please repeat your question.
I'm saying the service itself being simplified in the manner that it was, deliberately so, to reflect the open heart that he was and the inclusive approach that he took towards his papacy.
Absolutely, but some may also argue, Thabo, that this mass is no different to others that would have been had for other popes. When you look at specifically the ceremony, because it had all the elements, the liturgy of the word, the singing of the hymns, and all those necessary elements that are performed during the funeral mass of a pope, but certainly also saw scores of people coming, like other popes. But obviously, this was more of the Pope's final, send off, and done in a particular way, in a way that stood, or rather reflects who he was. You think about how he stood rather with migrants, and you connect that with his history, because he himself was born of migrants, and how he continued to raise the issue of treating migrants well, having sympathy towards migrants. You would have even seen him issuing out a statement when the Usindiso building in Johannesburg caught fire, highlighting the fact that some of the victims in that fire were migrants, and expressing the need to then care for those who are migrants who also survived, while also taking care of the rest of the survivors. So you see people from all walks of life. In fact, just about 30 minutes ago, I was speaking to a lady who was here for the Jubilee of Teenagers. She's traveled all the way from Nigeria together with her daughters, and was just reflecting on how, the Pope took the church on a journey to the periphery, really reminding people to go back to the basics. And that is what stood out during this process. We know that, the Catholic community will start the period of mourning for the next 9 days, which will then be followed by the conclave. But it is something that during this period, many of them will think about, in their own personal capacity, and the journey that we all take as individuals about who we are exactly as, human beings, and what it is that we contribute to the greater good, for the greater good.